welcome back to the channel. I am Joanna. This is another 642 Tiny Things to Draw update. I have been extremely procrastinating this project and haven't touched the book in like a month. First up, we have an oboe read, which I am a little disappointed at because we've already had a saxophone mouthpiece earlier in the book, which is practically the same thing. It's another musical instrument read, so like frickin' repeat. This book has been repeating a lot lately. Anyway, this whole drawing is done with Shuttle Art acrylic paint markers. It is a highly saturated doodle because the markers are highly saturated. Anyway, here it is finished. I had a little fun with the background by adding in some swirls, and now we are moving on to an incense cone. This is mostly done with graphite, keeping it very soft and sketchy, which I think is cute, and I think that works well for the smoke. I used a little bit of colored pencil to fill in the cone itself because those usually are colored. And I added in some dots with the colored pencil to get that texture of the incense cone. They're a little grainy looking. I darkened the edges of the background just because I think that looks cool. It's a stylistic choice, and I added a little bit of orange into that as well. And then I called it done, and it's simple, but I think it's cute. The next prompt is a sweet gumball, and I thought it would be really funny to have a tiny child being floated away due to her massive gumball bubble. So here is a tiny cartoon child blowing a massive bubble. Of course I had to fill in the bubblegum pink. And of course blue for the background because she is in the sky. And then for her dress I chose orange because orange and blue are complementary colors, and I think orange looks really cute with pink. As usual, darkening the edges. I think this looks cool. I added a bit of highlight and shadow into the gumball bubble with acrylic paint markers, and then I called it done. Here we have another very simple yet very cute little doodle. And now we have the engineer on a model train. I wanted this to look super toyish, so very simplistic character design, blank face, flat colors. I'm using Artist Loft colored pencils, and I very minimally shaded the outer edges because toys are 3D. They do need a little bit of shading, and I didn't record this part, but I did outline in Micron and added a little bit of highlight with Shuttle Art acrylic paint markers. There's that all done. Next up is the straw that broke the camel's back. I took some, or rather a lot, of creative liberties with this one. This whole thing is done in Shuttle Art acrylic paint markers, and I thought just drawing straw or hay would be really fucking boring. So here we have a camel that is cracked in half with some straw sticking out of its back, because that's what broke its back. I stuck to very warm colors because, you know, hot desert. Or is it savannah? I don't know. But here it is done. I like how this one came out. Next up, we have gingerbread hands. And I have them holding a gumdrop because that's cute. So first I put down some base shading with graphite, and now I'm coming in with Artist Loft colored pencils. I added the grainy texture of gingerbread with a darker brown just by adding some haphazard dots all over the hands. Once everything was colored, I came in with acrylic paint markers to outline and draw in some details like the frosting on the hands and some circles in the background to make it like, I don't know, Christmassy, I guess. Filling in the empty space. There's that done, and now we have paintbrush bristles. For this one, instead of drawing bristles, I thought it would be more interesting to get the impression of bristles. So I have very minimal acrylic paint on my brush, and I'm squishing it down into the page. And these kind of look like flower petals, so I put 5 down in a somewhat circle to make that flower shape. I added a few more prints in the background to fill in the page, and then to fill in that dead space, I just colored the whole thing in orange because complementary colors. I think this looks cool. I know it's not a drawing, but it was fun to experiment. Next up is a cube of Swiss cheese. This is mostly done in graphite, so not a whole lot to say here, just shading. When I finished with the graphite, I went over it with a dull yellow Artist Loft colored pencil to get a little bit of color in there. I used an orange colored pencil to fill in the holes because shadow. And lastly, I added some minor highlight lines, if you can even call them highlight lines, with acrylic paint markers. There's that finished, and next up is a compass dial, but I did more of the compass star that you would find on a map. Circles are difficult, so all those curved lines did not come out fantastically. I tried. Anyway, this whole thing is done in Micron, and it's all stippling, which is dots on top of dots. The more dots you have in an area, the darker it'll look, the less dots, the lighter, so that's how you get value. This is very repetitive, so I didn't record a lot of it. We're gonna skip ahead. There it is finished, and now we have a crystal shard. I decided to draw a pattern inspired by bismuth. Bismuth is so fucking pretty, and I don't understand how it grows so geometrically, because like geometric shapes are not typically found in nature. But here you have this crystal that is squares on top of squares, and I don't get it, but it's gorgeous. So first I sketched out some guidelines with graphite, and then I filled in all of those shapes with metallic Grabie acrylic paint markers, and I'm using shiny paint for obvious reasons, because it's a crystal, it's shiny. Bismuth starts yellow and then fades to pink to green to blue to purple, so I tried to imitate that color pattern best I could with the colors I had available in my marker set. I originally wanted to outline this and add a bunch of lines in it when the paint was dry because bismuth does have a lot of lines due to all those layers, but I started outlining in Micron and I realized this looks really bad, so I stopped. Anyway, there it is finished, and now moving on to fish gills. Fish gills are actually terrifying. Please go Google image fish gills so you could be traumatized with me because they're not cute. Oh my god, I don't know what I was expecting when I Googled reference images for this, but it wasn't what came up. That's scary. This is mostly done with Artecho watercolor. Here I am shading the gills, which really look like raw meat slabs. Like I said, they're scary. They are a very nice shade of deep red. However, I tried my best to color match that. I don't think I succeeded. They're also kind of feathery looking because they have a lot of lines in them and the jagged edges, so here I am trying to bring out that texture. Then filling in the rest of the fish with green and blotting in some yellow to break up the color because fish scales are not typically solid. They have some splotchiness and color variation in them. Then when the paint dried, I used colored pencils to really deepen those shadows around the scales and under the skin flap that covers the gills, and of course the gills themselves. Like I said, the gills are a really nice deep bloody red, and I tried my best to get that color. It didn't work out for me. We ended up with more of a scarlet. And lastly was outlines and highlights. Here it is finished. I think this looks pretty cool, and now we have a spin top. I wanted this to be in motion. So I am putting down some paint with Grabie acrylic paint markers, and then I'm using my finger to smear it off to the sides to try to get that blur. I really like this color combination. I think it's so cute, but my execution of motion blur, not so much. I added some highlight and motion lines around it at the end. This is not good. This doodle is kind of a fail. We're gonna move on. Now we have a hand lens, which is basically a little magnifying glass. You know the drill for metallics, a whole lot of base shading with graphite, pushing harder for the darker shadows, keeping light pressure for the highlights, and then of course blending that all together with my finger. When I was done with the graphite, I colored the whole thing in with a blue colored pencil because the reference photo I was looking at had like a blue sheen to it, and I thought that was fancy. Then for even deeper shading, I added some Micron. You know me, I love a good contrast, so adding deep dark black shadows is always fun. I made the background a reddish color to match the fish gills above it, and then I darkened the corner with Micron because I like dark corners. And lastly, I added a little bit of highlight with white acrylic paint marker and some shine with silver acrylic paint marker, and there it is done. For the last doodle of this update, we have a smiley face. Originally, I was going to draw the smiley face emoji, but then I was like, no, that's boring. So here we have a creepy lizard man smile thing. Did a little base shading with graphite, and then I colored it in with alcohol markers. I used mostly Touch alcohol markers. Granted, I don't actually know if that is the brand name, but that is what the markers say. And I also used a little bit of Skin Tone Artify markers. I mixed an olive green color and a light tan color to get this somewhat skin tone of a sickly green. And of course, darker browns to add in all the shading. I used a gray blue around the eyes to sink them in even more, and then a bright yellow for the eyes themselves. Because yellow goes good with green, and yellow eyes make it look more monstrous and reptilian. I also gave this guy yellow teeth, and then bright red gums for contrast. I came back in with the same green that I used for the skin earlier and added some dots in the blank areas to give it some texture, make it look scaly or grimy or something like that. And lastly, I used 2 shades of red to add some blood around the teeth, and I think that looks really cool. That brings us to the end of this update. Thank you so much for watching. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more of me. Click the link in the description box, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!